What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. It's Professor Anime and welcome back to another video. In today's video, guys, I'm here to bring you all my review of Berserk 2016 episode 3. So let's get started. So before we actually get this review started, I just want to say thank you to everyone who commented last week on my Berserk 2016 episode 2 review. I really do appreciate all of your comments that you left down and, you know, just hearing your overall thoughts on what you thought about the anime so far. It was really supportive, it was. However, I did get some negative feedback as well, but it seems like I got negative feedback from one specific thing that I stated in the review that apparently I should have known all along. Now, I wasn't complaining about this, but I was just confused over, you know, what was going on here, and that was the whole Behelit situation. Now, yes, there are Behelits out there that are other than the God Hand. There are Behelits for the Apostles. Now, the thing that I stated in my review was that these Behelits actually can change color, that they have various different colors. So, yeah, you guys let me know that apparently the Behelits that have a different color compared to the God Hand are actually the Behelits of the Apostles. Now, I didn't know about this. I really didn't. Because from the animes that I have watched of Berserk and also the manga that I have read up to volume 17 of Berserk, there was no clarification on, you know, the color scheme of the Behelits. I never knew about that at all. However, someone pointed out that apparently, you know, when it comes to the Berserk cover pages or like certain pages that are drawn in, you will see that the Behelits' colors are different compared to the God Hand. And probably because of the fact that I didn't know that was probably because of the fact that, you know, I don't read the scanlations to Berserk. I actually buy the manga, and everything in the manga is black and white. I don't look up scanlations for Berserk, so there's no way in, you know, knowing that, you know, the colors to the Behelits would be different. So I just wanted to, you know, get that out of the way before we started this review. So with that out of the way, let's actually discuss this week's episode of Berserk. So how was this week's episode? In my personal opinion, I thought that this episode was meh. It was decent. It was average at best. However, this week's episode was definitely a lot stronger compared to the last two episodes of Berserk that we have gotten. And that is probably because that this week's episode of Berserk was actually written by Kentaro Miura himself. Apparently, like, the script was actually written for this week's episode of Berserk. So that was very interesting. Now, we did get certain things end up, you know, going about differently compared to how you would in the manga. Like, for example, Farnese and Guts meeting in a mansion. That was never in the manga. And also, we meet the Apostle that Guts first takes down with his Dragon Slayer sword in this episode as well, in this mansion. So, yes, the order of certain events are different. However, there are actually certain scenes within this week's episode of Berserk that are actually prevalent in the manga. And what am I talking about here? I'm, of course, talking about the infamous rape horse scene. Now, I personally thought that we were going to skip over this. I really thought we were going to skip over this. But apparently, I guess Kentaro Miura, you know, wanted this scene in this episode. So I thought this was very funny. Now, as far as the CGI goes in this episode, you know, I'm not going to complain too much over. I mean, but there were some very weird looking scenes within this week's episode of Berserk, especially with the horse scene. Now, I'm not going to talk about the CGI because I've already ranted on that, but, you know, we actually got to see the horse rape scene, so, I mean, awesome. What I think the studio did a pretty good job when it comes to this week's episode of Berserk was how this episode showed the fear within Farnese. I mean, sure, yes, the CGI is limiting the facial expressions for some of the characters, and it kind of like downgrades the emotional impact that you would probably have out of, you know, this anime compared to if you have gotten a 2D art style. But, well, I'm not talking about the CGI here. I'm not talking about the art style. What I'm trying to say is that this episode served the purpose as to showing fear within Farnese, to open up her eyes to a different world that she has never seen before and that she was completely ignorant of. You know, a world filled with demons. And that was the main point where Guts was trying to make a point to Farnese within this episode. You know, he is basically telling her that, hey, you know, open up your eyes. This is the real world. These things actually exist within our world. This is the dark side of humanity. It's not a happy-go-lucky place. There is actually dark shit involved in our lives. And that is the point that Guts was trying to make, and that is also the point that he was trying to make in Volume 17 of Berserk. So when it comes to the execution, as far as Farnese's, development goes, I think that this week's episode of Berserk actually did a pretty decent job at that. So yeah, in the next episode of Berserk, it seems like we are going to see Zod, Casca, Rickert, and also Father Mozgus as well. And probably with that episode, it's going to wrap up Volume 17 of Berserk. So I really need to get more volumes because, volumes 1 through 17 is all I got of Berserk at the moment. So, yeah. But when it comes to next week's episode, we can definitely expect that it seems like they are going to be adapting from the original source material. And, we're probably going to see the Conviction arc take place as well. But hopefully the Conviction arc is actually going to be good. Okay, because they skipped 6 volumes in episode 1, okay? They skipped those entire arcs. Now, hopefully they can just adapt this one arc and actually, execute it well. So yeah, when it comes to this week's episode of Berserk, I definitely felt as it was a lot stronger compared to the last 2 episodes that we have gone. So it was decent. It was pretty average. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below on what you thought about this week's episode of Berserk. And of course, if you like this video, don't forget to drop a like. It always helps out the channel. And if you want to stick up to date to my future content on this channel, please hit that red subscribe button below and you will never miss a video from me. That about does it for this video, guys. Love you all. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.